Hey, thank you for joining us today. As always, we want to encourage you to stay in contact with us and submit any prayer requests that you might have through the website or the Church Center app. Enjoy the service.
One big announcement, something I'm excited about. This is kind of a big part of who we are, and it's important for you as a congregation to know this. We are not, our congregation as a church is led and guided by a council of many, not just one person leading the whole thing. And we call our leaders shepherds. And the shepherds serve as a term of anywhere from 3 to 5 years. And in that 3 to 5 years, they serve as the council of leadership for the church. They oversee all the spiritual matters. They also oversee kind of the direction and vision, making sure we're staying in line, making sure we're staying in line biblically. They counsel as far as any like personal things that people have issue that they want to kind of meet with someone, as well as just counsel, the overall counsel of the church. They oversee the budgets, all that kind of stuff. So done by mostly volunteers. I am one of the shepherds as well, but mostly volunteers. And so really excited today that we have two new people that we are asking to be considered as shepherds. Now, another thing is we don't vote. We don't vote on our shepherds. We just kind of believe that voting can become a popularity contest. The person with the most charisma or the most popularity ends up becoming the leaders, and those oftentimes are not always the best leaders. So it's more of a process that they go through being involved and serving and being watched. But then we do ask for approval. And the way that works is the two people I'm going to bring up, they have been through almost a year, about 9-10 months of a process where they took a spiritual leadership class. They've written out their testimony. They had to answer about 3 pages of questions in regards to how they would deal with certain things spiritually, what they believe about certain things, their character, all sorts of things like that. Plus, during that whole time, our current shepherds have just been observing them and watching them. So now we're going to bring them up before you, and we want to let you know that you have 6 months from this point. If there's anything or any reason why you feel like they should not be considered, we want you to bring that forward, and it would be done anonymously. You don't have to worry about us calling you out or anything like that. So if there's something that you would know or see, whether it be in their business life, their home life, their community life. If you're driving down the road sometime and someone, just starts honking at you and flipping you a bird and you look and go, oh, it's that guy that's supposed to be a shepherd, right there. Like, just come and tell us, all right? We want to know. So anyway, so at this point, I just want to ask both Bruce and Chad to come on up. These are the two new people we are considering. I'm not even going to ask them to talk at this point, but I want you to see who they are. Bruce has been serving with our worship team for several years now. He and his wife, Shelly, actually about half the time go up to our Camas campus and serve there. But now they are kind of trying to seek to make it more their home here in Heber. But they pretty much, one of the reasons they've been doing that is just because there was a need. And that's what I love, that there's a need. We can fill that. And so they were driving up and doing that. And then this is Chad. And Chad is actually at almost at the point where we're not going to call him shepherd, but saint, because he serves in the junior high Sunday school ministry. So Chad's been working with our junior high Sunday school for about 2.5, 3 years, and does a great job. The kids love going to junior high Sunday school and learning about God in fun ways. He does a great job. I look out there and they're always like playing weird games, and then he brings it in with like Bible, right? So anyway, these are our two guys. Give them a warm hand and just thank them for stepping up to this. And if you, like I said, if at any time in this 6 months, so in 6 months, we will bring them up to lay hands on them and pray over them as the leaders. But if any time in that 6 months you have something you want to bring up, please notify the church office. All right. one of the things they needed to do was share their testimony. So before we jump into this morning's sermon, we have a video of Bruce's testimony.
Well, hello everyone. My name is Bruce Gladwin, and I thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit about myself. I would have to say that I was a pretty compliant kid. I'm the fourth of 4 children, and I had 2 older sisters and an older brother. And I watched them go through struggles with my mom and dad, and felt like maybe if I just gave my mom and dad a break and made it easy on them, that they'd make it easy on me. And so I was a pretty compliant kid, but reality was, in the background, I was doing things that I knew I shouldn't have been doing, and became really good at hiding those things. And so my mom and dad have both passed away at this point, but if they knew some of the things that I was doing when I appeared to be a great kid, maybe they would have different thoughts. I don't know. But anyway, that's my story as a teenager and going through that period of just really trying to understand who I was. So it was at a conference that I went to with Campus Crusade for Christ up in Prescott, Arizona. I remember very distinctly just feeling that God wanted me to make a public statement that I was going to follow him, and I wanted him to be in my life. And so I remember asking him into my life at that point, and it's been a steady journey ever since. There's certainly been bumps along the road, but that was the time. Shelley and I have been very involved in the worship ministry. You've seen us on the stage, and I love being part of the worship ministry because it helps people connect and draw close to God. Now, I've never been any incredible vocalist. I can play the guitar okay, but I love to serve in that way. I love to see your faces in the congregation. I love to see people with hands lifted high and just in love with God. That's probably how I've grown in my faith as much as any way, is just to help people in that way to connect with God through song and through worship. The area I probably struggle with the most is sharing my faith with other people. I want very much to share my faith with other people. I think I'm always afraid, and many people are, that when we share our faith, it's going to be taken the wrong way, that we're going to be seen as some kind of zealot, and that we're pushing religion down people's throat. All right, so that's pretty much my testimony. I love Jesus Christ. I love the Lord my God. I want to serve him the rest of my days, and I just feel that I'm humbled to be called to serve as a shepherd. I know it's going to be a lot of work. It's a big responsibility, but I look forward to getting to know many more people in the church here, and really hearing your stories as well. And so thanks for allowing me to share my story, and I hope to get to know all of you a lot better over the next several years.
All right. Well, thank you, Bruce, for sharing. Next week, we'll hear a little bit of Chad's testimony. And like I said, I really encourage you to take some time. If who the leaders are of the church you go to is important to you, take some time and get to know them. They are definitely available. All right. So, hey, we are in the middle of a series called God Is. And today I want to talk about God is Creator. That God is the Creator. And I want to do this a little bit different, maybe than if you've ever heard a sermon on this. And so we're going to take it in some different angles. But, creativity is an interesting thing. I've never really thought of myself as a creative person. I don't like crafts. Every once in a while, I think I'll do a craft, like if other people are doing it, and I'll sit down and like within 10 minutes, I'm really bored. And then it starts to look like a second grade art project. And then I just kind of have that like more is better, and then eventually it's just like, and I'm like, that didn't work out. But I usually get bored and I usually just kind of start making a joke of it because I'm just not very good at it. Even writing, I like to communicate. So I thought, well, writing, I could write creatively and do some stuff with that. And I've worked on a couple stories at times and thought about that. And I'm just too ADD. It's hard enough for me to sit down and write a sermon every week, let alone to add writing to that. So I just have never really gotten through that. So when it comes to building, any of that stuff, I don't really think of myself as very creative. And yet it's interesting because when you think about it, God is creator, right? He is the creator. And we are in the image of God. So at some level, we all are meant to create. We all have that within us. And I want to look at that a little bit. And what does that even mean to create? And why does it mean that God is the creator? Many scientists would say that all of this came to be by an accident of nature. And today my intention is not to do a creation versus evolution kind of sermon. If you ever want to know more about my opinions on that, I think science and creationism can very much work together from everything I've studied on it. And I did study science before I became a theologian. I still wouldn't call myself a theologian, but before I started studying more the aspects of God. So I do believe there's very much that can be mixed together. But today is not a discussion on why we exist and how, but rather, what does this mean that God is the creator, and what does that mean for us? See, we looked at holiness, right? We talked about God's holiness, and we talked about the greatness of God. And we looked at both of those and how we, as being an image of God, can kind of seek to emulate those things even in our own life. And so I want to even talk about how do we emulate this idea of create in our life today. So this attribute today we want to look at is the fact that God is a creative God. God is a creative God. See, and I think it's interesting because I think it's different to just say, oh, God created, and to say, no, that is part of who God is, right? And then also being in the nature of God, we as humans are creative as well. Right? Nothing else in all of creation is as creative or appreciates creativity as much as humans, right? I know it could be argued, people that want to argue that animals and humans are on the same level, that, that animals use creativity. And I'm not saying they don't in some level, but if you study much about that, most of the creativity that an animal uses is only for the purpose of survival, right? Like for instance, otters. Otters are pretty creative in the fact that they learned how to use rocks to bust open shellfish in order to survive, right? Now, however, I've also never heard of an otter looking over and going, hey, Jim, that's pretty cool that you're banging a rock with that, but I bet you we could get that open a lot quicker if we just found something sharp to pry in there and then bang that with the rock. They don't do that. There's not that level of creativity. Nothing else in all of creation is as creative or appreciates creativity the way humans do. And so to kind of start the basis of understanding for this, let's just look at the process of creation for God. To do that, we're going to turn to the very beginning. Genesis 1, verse 1 through 11. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw the light, and saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning the first day. And God said, let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters. And God made the expanse and separated the waters that were under the expanse from the waters that were above the expanse. And it was so. And God called the expanse heaven, and there was evening, and there was morning, and the second day. And God said, let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called seas, and God saw that it was good. And God said, let the earth support vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees bearing fruit, in which their seed, each according to its kind, on the earth. And it was so. For his invisible, okay, that's it. I thought that was it. All right. Now, just so you know, if you ever want to research all sorts of stuff, if we were going to get into an evolution creation thing in here, all sorts of stuff that's worth looking into. You notice he said to separate the waters from the sky and the earth. And then if you read Genesis chapter 6, there was a great flood. And in the great flood, it says the canopy was opened and the waters fell. That if we believe that God created the earth and the flood, it makes sense that it was at one point more of a green, terrarium kind of state when God created the earth, which would have been a place for dinosaurs to thrive and all this. And then when the canopy fell for the flood, created a drier climate, dinosaurs no longer would thrive like they do today, which would account for dinosaurs. There's a lot of stuff, but there's some really interesting things in there that actually show that the Bible kind of actually maybe knew what it was talking a little bit about when it was written. Anyway, moving on. Notice a few things it says here. One, it says that God spoke these things into existence. God's power to create is so strong that he speaks it into existence. But another thing that I think is interesting is that he named it. He names his creation, meaning he cares about it. See, a lot of people will say, well, I believe in God, but he just made it start happening, and then he just doesn't care. But you notice from the very beginning, God cares enough to name these things. And if you go through the whole thing, we could go into great detail about this. But just to notice, God has the power to create. It's part of who he is. He cares about that creation. And when we look at that creation, it is meant to point us to God. Look at Romans 1, verse 20. It says, for his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in things that have been made, so that they are without excuse. Now, in this section, Paul's talking about those who say, I don't believe in God and won't worship a God. And he's saying, when you look around and you perceive what God has done, that is testimony to the fact that there is a God. We see that we are without excuse for lack of faith simply by his creation. See, to say that that everything exists that exists, with all the minute detail, everything from molecular structure all the way to the expanse of space, exist in the exact precise details it needs to exist in for us to have life. To say, Paul's saying, to say that happens and not believe in a God it's inexcusable. He's almost saying you're acting out of ignorance. And see, a lot of people would say, well, that was in the Bible was written and they didn't understand all these things. I would argue that the more we understand, the more it should point us to God. The more we understand how precise every little thing has to be. Simply for you to breathe air right now that you're breathing. Simply for you to move. Simply for you to be able to see me. All these things are so precise. And to say that happened without a God, Paul's saying, is ridiculous. It'd be like saying, you know what, I drove from here to California, and I threw a bunch of paint cans and a canvas in the back of a moving truck, and I drove. And when I pulled out, voila, a Monet. Like the paint just bounced around and it dripped just the right ways and all that. It just kind of happened. And wow, look at this work of art. And then it's argued, I've heard the same argument. Well, yeah, but you're given it the time. Well, the Earth's a little bit more complex than a Monet, just saying. But even then, I could see, if you're looking at it from a distance, you might be able to say, oh, but the more you look, if you looked at that painting, you're like, no, that is a beautiful work of art. And then to say, but it just happened, is pure foolishness. And yet, when it comes to creation, oftentimes people will buy in to that. See, the belief in life without a creator, it just doesn't make sense. I mean, think about this. We are floating around on a giant rock through space. And you add into that gravity and seasons and molecular structure and DNA. And when you look at all the precise science behind it all, and to say it just happened by chance, it just doesn't make sense. In fact, let me read to you what one scientist said. This guy's name is Robert Jastrow. He's an agnostic. And yet he even had this to say in his book, God and the Astronomers. He said, a sound explanation may exist for the explosive birth of our universe. But if it does, science cannot find out what that explanation is. The scientist's pursuit of the past ends in the moment of creation. And this is an exceedingly strange development, unexpected by everyone but the theologians. They have always accepted the word in the Bible. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. To which St. Augustine added, who can understand this mystery or explain it to others? The development is unexpected because science has had such extraordinary successes in tracing the chain of cause and effect backward in time. And now we would like to pursue that inquiry even further back in time, but the barrier to further progress seems insurmountable. It is not a matter of another year, another decade of work. It's not another measurement or another theory. At this moment, it seems that science will never be able to raise the curtain on the mystery of creation. Love this analogy he gives. For the scientist who has lived by his faith in the power of reason, the story ends like a bad dream. He has scaled the mountains of ignorance, and he is about to conquer the highest peak. As he pulls himself over the final rock, he's greeted by a band of theologians who have been sitting there for centuries. And I say that it's to say that, like I said, this isn't a discussion of evolution versus creation. I actually believe evolution in some ways works very much within the creation process. However, I feel like that's a foundation that has to get laid because at some form, as Christ followers, we have to decide, do I believe the Bible? Do I believe it? Or am I going to be sold a set of goods from science who lives more on faith just because they tell me to? Because they make it feel like I'm ignorant if I don't. Okay? But there are many scientists and others who would agree that is simply not the case. Okay. Isaiah 45:18. Look at what he says. For thus says the Lord, who created the heavens? He is God. Who formed the earth and made it? He established it. He did not create it empty. He formed it to be inhabited. I am the Lord, and there is no other God. Look at the words he uses here. He formed it. He fashioned it. He created it, right? It's words that say he cares about this. It's not just something he like put out there. He cares about it. See, one of the greatest things about God's creation is that while it definitely serves purpose, he didn't just make it to serve a purpose, right? He created it to be beautiful, to be wondrous, to be awe-inspiring. I appreciate creativity. I love seeing the creative works of people. But I have never seen any so creative as what God has created. You know, I think about the intricacies of the animal kingdom. Everything from the delicate beauty of a butterfly to the odd beauty of a moose or a giraffe, to the awe-inspiring beauty of a whale, to terrain of mountains and waterfalls and rainforests and desert skies. And nature, just the oldest twisted trees, to some that just look like they are made to be as symmetrical as possible, to the delicate intricacies of flowers. And yet, with all of that creativity, nothing compares to the pinnacle of God's creation, and that is humanity. The pinnacle of God's creation is humanity. Look at Genesis chapter 2, verse 7 and 8. Then the Lord formed the man out of dust and from the ground and breathed into his nostrils and the breath of life, and the man became a living creature. And the Lord God planted a garden in Eden and in the east, and there he put the man whom he had formed. And then later on it talks about how he formed Eve out of the man, and everything was formed within humans, and he breathed life into them. Go back to that first verse there, 7. It's interesting to know, if you read the Hebrew in this, when it says he breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, that's actually the same word that we use for soul. He gave us a soul. It's the only thing in all of creation that he said, that the Bible says he gave a soul to. Now, I know some of you are going to argue with me that your dog has a soul. And I'm sure you love your dogs. But if that has a soul, so does a cockroach. And if we're going about theology, so does everything. And I'm not saying we shouldn't love, but the point is that the pinnacle of what God created is humanity. Now, this can be twisted, right, to say, oh, we rule over everything. We have power over everything. We have dominion. No. Or it could also be turned, if we really look at it from the Christ-like ways, to say, we should, in the image of God, be the creators. We should bring life. We should help. We should bless. We should care for those things that are weaker and lesser than us. Look at Isaiah 43, verse 7. Everyone who is called by my name, who I created for my glory, who I formed and made. You hear that? He said, we're created for the glory of God. And he formed us, he made us. Isaiah 44, verse 2. Thus says the Lord who made you, who formed you from the womb and will help you. Fear not, O Jacob, my servant, Jeshurun, whom I have chosen. He's saying he formed us. I think it's just so important to grasp that. You're not just something that was just put out, right? It's not assembly lines. Each of us formed. Let me just give you a few basic things of science here about our bodies. The eye. Let's think about the eye. The retina in the eye is about 1 square inch of tissue that has over 1 million light receptor cells, made up of fat cones and slender rods that convert light into electrochemical energy, enabling a person to see. It's a delicate camera that takes over 196 color photos every second. It has its own light meter protection, cleaning equipment, self-repairing, and focusing abilities. Think about that. All of that happened in your eye. The ear, that seems like a simple one, right? But it's not by accident. The outer ear collects sound waves from the air and it funnels them into our eardrum. That wave causes our eardrum to vibrate. That eardrum vibrates, which sends out frequencies. And that moves the eardrum only 1/1000th of a centimeter. And vibrations are mechanically transmitted and amplified through the 3 connecting ears in your bones in your inner ear. And the mechanical vibrations enter a fluid in the inner ear. And those waves are converted into nerve impulses by the 24,000 auditory receptor cells in each of your ears. The auditory nerve transmits these to the brain, enabling a person to hear. Oh, and also provides you with balance. The heart beats about 100,000 times a day, pumping this one was new to me, 5.8 tons of blood per day, which is enough to fill a 4,000-gallon tank car. The entire circulatory system includes passageways that total 60,000 miles, and the heart is self-lubricating, has high capacity, and self-regulating. Our skeleton makes up 1/5 of our body weight. Yet because of its design, it's more flexible and stronger for its size than if we were made of wood or steel. A man's thigh bone is strong enough to support the weight of a small car. Most of the muscles in your hand, most of the muscles that control your fingers are located not in your hand, but in your forearm. If they were located in your hand would be too big to coordinate. See, when you put all these things together, the brain, our skeletal structure, our systems, not only is it mind-boggling to think that someone could say that over any amount of time, it would all come together to that precision. But that it didn't take creativity. It took a creative God. And you think about the moment for the variety of this world. And God didn't just make it for a purpose, He made it for enjoyment. So that said, what does that mean about us? Well, it means we're created in His image, right? Genesis 1:26 says we are created in the image of God. Doesn't just mean we have an eternal soul. It means we have intellect. It means we can love and we can appreciate beauty and we can create. And that means we should be using that to create. So we're meant to create, right? That's one thing this means, being made in His image. It means we are meant to create. We're God's children. So we are constantly going to be seeking to stretch ourselves and to grow and to be more like Him, just as a child does, right? Right? Your children, when you love watching them create, you love watching them learn and grow and figure things out. But one thing we have to remember is that we are not greater than the Creator. We are not greater than the Creator. In our creativity, and in our desire to stretch ourselves, we oftentimes forget the Creator. We forget the Creator. And as a culture, I fear that we are becoming a culture that wants to forget the Creator. Because we figured out we can do it on our own. We're like the 15-year-old kid, right? Right? Any of you raised teenagers yet? Right? Any of you remember being a teenager? Right? I went through that. I figured stuff. I remember when I was about 8 years old and I figured out how to make peanut butter and jelly sandwich and started thinking, I could just live on my own. I don't need these people, right? Then my dad reminded me someone would have to buy the peanut butter. I was like, okay, I'll figure that one out too, right? And you just figure stuff out. By the time I'm 15 or 16 and I got a job, especially 16, I got a job, I got a car, I'm making a little money here and there. I don't need these people. They're in my way. They have rules. They're kind of stupid, really. I'm so much smarter than they are, right? I mean, anyone? Yeah, a few of you? Okay. I went through that phase, right? My parents are lucky. How are they even breathing? I guess I have to stay so that they don't die. They're just so dumb, right? I literally remember thinking all these things. But then I matured and I went, hey, you know what? I should be grateful for my parents. Hey, you know what? I might think I'm all that in a bag of chips, but they figured some stuff out. And I began to be grateful for them, right? But oftentimes we are become like that arrogant teenager and we just stay there. When we just say, I don't need God. I've got this figured out. God has rules. God, I'm figuring out, we're as a culture, we're being able to do all the things God can do. We get stuck there. And I think this is the beginning to understand who we are. See, each and every one of us was created in His image. We're meant to create. We're meant to grow. We're meant to practice science. We're meant to learn this stuff. But why, because we've learned this stuff, have we said, why does that equate to some people that know there's no creator? That makes no sense. Just because you learned to do some things doesn't mean you say, oh, my parents no longer exist, or I no longer want anything to do with my parents. God has a creative love for us. And that creative love for us gives us freedom. And in that creative freedom, we can create. Man, we see all throughout the Bible His creative love for us. And because of time, I'm not going to go into details, but you look at all the things God worked out, and then ultimately to work it out through Christ on the cross to love us at that level. But here's something we need to remember, and I'll close with this. There is a creator, but there is also a destroyer. The enemy of the creator is the destroyer. John 10 tells us this: the thief comes only to kill and steal and destroy, but I came that you might have life and have it abundantly. See, life to enjoy. God gave you life to enjoy that. Because why? Because He's a creator. He wants you to enjoy life. Right? A creative person wants you to enjoy. But the thief comes to steal things from you. He comes to slowly destroy everything in your life. And guess what? Very rarely does he rush the door with guns, clubs, and chainsaws. Right? If you open your door to the house and all of a sudden you see people running across the street with a chainsaw or a club or shooting a gun, what are you going to do? You're going to shut the door. Heck no. You ain't getting in here. You know what the thief reminds me more of? It's something that's been happening for years. There's this thing where people will disguise themselves as utility workers or security salesmen with the idea of just let us in. Just let me in. I got to look at something. I got to go over something. And then they beat whoever's in the home and steal. See, Satan doesn't come at you with clubs and chainsaws and guns. He's smarter than that. Every once in a while, he'll find someone dumb enough he can catch like that. But for the most part, he knows. No, I'm just got to slip in and just take a little here and there. Or I just got to get in enough. Once I'm in enough, I can wreak havoc in that person's life. But God wants to build you up. He wants to give you abundance. He wants to stretch you and grow. Everything that is good, everything that builds up, encourages and strengthens and brings beauty is from God. And you and I are created in His image. That means we should be living our life to strengthen, to encourage, to build up, to bring beauty into other people's lives. What are you creating in people's lives today? Let's pray. Father God, I thank you for your creative being. That is just part of who you are. It's one of your attributes. It's not just something you did. It is who you are. You're constantly creating beauty in our lives. you're constantly seeking to make good things in our life. And God, sometimes we forget to hand over the tools to you. We want to hold them, or we want to give them to the enemy. God, I pray that you help us to just give the tools to you so that you can continue creating beauty in our lives. In Jesus' name, amen.
In the darkness we were waiting, without hope, without light, till from heaven you came running. There was mercy in your eyes, till fulfilled the law and prophets. To a virgin came the word, from a throne of endless glory to a cradle in the dirt. Praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, three in one. God of glory, majesty, praise forever to the King of Peace. To reveal the kingdom coming, and to reconcile the lost, to redeem the whole creation. You did not despise the cross, for even in your suffering you saw to the other side, knowing this was our salvation. Jesus, for our sake you died. Praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, three in one. God of glory, majesty, praise forever to the King of Kings. In the morning that you rose, all of heaven held its breath, till that stone was moved for good, for the Lamb had conquered death, and the dead rose from their tombs, and the angels stood in awe. For the souls of all who come to the Father are restored, and the church of Christ was born. Then the Spirit lit the flame. Now this gospel truth of all will not kneel, shall not faint. By the blood and
Thank you for joining us this week. Please reach out to us if you need anything. We would love to chat with all of you. Bye.